So we've seen a bunch of impacts on chief security officers as they've been sending folks from home. And this can vary pretty wildly depending on what type of work the organization may have undertaken before the pandemic, right? And so folks that have invested in kind of zero trust networks and really had kind of been supporting either remote workers or remote offices over time may have had less impact. Some organizations have had significant impacts. And so we've seen it kind of in a couple of areas. One would be around the technological impact. So a lot of organizations have built security postures or security plans based on assumptions about where devices were or where data would reside, and those things have changed. Right. So all of a sudden you've got personal devices accessing data. You may have data sitting on devices you don't own. You've got work devices on networks that you don't control. And so if you had a compliance or other control that was relying on your next gen firewall to do a thing, and it no longer can do that anymore, then your assumptions may be bad.
Almost everything that we build now in order to protect the enterprise is built around understanding what normal looks like, and developing a very detailed data-driven picture of what normal looks like. And then what we do is our technology and our analysts search for anything which is anomalous. And that's kind of the trigger for us to go and do things. There's no such thing as normal anymore, right? Every baseline that we had created, every understanding we had about what was normal for the business in terms of probably business hours, what systems spoke to different systems, like everything that we care about from a baselining perspective has now changed. So we're really back to square one in having to develop an understanding of what the business now looks like, what is normal for the business now in this new environment that we're all working in. So that generates an awful lot of additional work, and it means that a lot of the things that we've built, a lot of alerts and queries and things that we have in place to trigger on are no longer effective.
And I think the last thing that I would highlight that I've seen kind of people overlook a bit is what is the impact on the security team of being at home, right? These teams, a lot of times, especially if you have a full security operation, they're used to working in the same room together, right? So how effective are they? Have they trained for these things? Have they run processes or tests of their processes, assuming that certain people weren't available, right? Because it's not just working from home. You've got people with kids at home because daycares are canceled. You've got people with kids at home because schools are canceled. All these types of things that can be challenging in a lot of the assumptions about your people, processes, and tools just may not hold up now. And so there is a good thought process of making sure that you go back and rethink about those things and make sure that you still have the protections in place that you think you do, and you don't find out that they're not there when you have an incident. Yeah, and I think the friction angle and the people angle is a very important one to think about, right? Because so much of this working from home stuff is band-aided, right? That means that the friction for users is higher, which means they will spend time to get around it, right? And so some of the stuff that you even think might be possible, right, is probably not actually happening, right? People are using their home devices to access a thing because they don't want to deal with the restrictions that the other one has on it. So, that friction level on your users means that it's sometimes also harder to introduce new security new security technologies or new security processes or change their processes. And at the same time, every other process in the business is changing. It's not just security that's impacted by this; it's everything. Right. And so there can be a lot of stress. I mean, a really good example would be like how many more employees are screwing with stuff on their phone now? Right. Because they're chasing kids around. They're running errands during the day. They're whatever it is. Right. And so you're less likely to maybe mouse over a link and make sure that it's a thing before you click on it. Right. And so those types of things are very simple, very normal behavior changes that may result in increased tempo or increased challenges to the security org. Life has changed. That change broke all of our baselines and assumptions. So there's actually a lot of tactical work right now just to defend the business, and that some of the more strategic projects or longer term projects may need to slow down, right? Or may even need to be reevaluated in light of changes to the kind of business view. At the same time, there's going to be a lot of churn in strategic priorities in that we're also dealing with an economic challenge. Right. And that economic challenge will mean that the business is now looking at changes that they need to make to be more efficient, more effective. And sometimes that could mean additional investments, right? Where it's like now's a good time to go and try to grab market share while your competitors are having problems, right? There's lots of different things that can be going on in the space that will impact the kind of head of security CSO's person's role and decision making.
But security fundamentally has to be a business enabler, so like we're there to enable the business to do what the business needs to do, but to be able to execute a lower level of risk as possible, right? That's really the role of a modern security program. So the business context has changed now, right? So the things that we may need to do, the things that the business may need to do to take advantage of the situation that we're in, or to continue to operate effectively in the situation that we're in, means that the security team needs to enable the business to do different things and do things in different ways. So there's definitely a balance to be struck at the moment to understanding what the tactical things that we need to do to defend the business are, as well as how do we minimize risk across the company for the business to operate effectively in the current environment.
There's a lot of demand on the strategic vision of security leaders right now. And those security leaders aren't always CSOs, right? They can be directors of security. They could be the CIO, right? Whoever's in charge of security in that particular business, there's a lot of work going on. The business is changing its strategy. Everybody's working from home, and there's a lot of demand on that strategic muscle, right? At the same time, there's an increased operational tempo, which means that the teams are being bombarded with security issues that are going to be more of them, and they're going to take longer to investigate. So MDR can be a very good fit for customers that want to offload the 27th phishing attack that they're dealing with to a specialized team who does nothing but that, right? So we can afford to staff at a higher level than most customers can. We can afford to train at a higher level. We can afford to hire at a higher level, right? And so it allows us to build a security organization with a lot of depth, both in resources and in expertise, to handle that type of block and tackle, to free up the resources inside of a company to focus on those strategic priorities that the business cares about, right? Because those people will always be better positioned to help the business. They understand the business context better than we will, right? But we're better positioned to be able to handle those types of attacks. And so that can make a lot of sense for organizations that really want to start to pivot their resources from this very tactical view to a more strategic view to support some of these changes that are coming both from COVID and from the economic damage that's a result of it. There are a lot of lessons that have come out of that IT transformation process that we can apply to this working from home pandemic process, even though we're going to be doing it under increased pressure for sure. Again, this I think goes back to this idea around what lessons did we learn from IT transformation that we can apply, right? So what we saw a lot of was everybody got sent home. All of a sudden, the VPN infrastructure couldn't handle it, and so we just scaled VPN infrastructures up, right? And it's like, well, the VPN infrastructure is actually a pretty poor way to gate access to resources, right? And that's really what the zero trust movement has been about over the last 3 to 5 years, is around making sure that we can give people access to the things that they need when they need it and access to nothing else. And we're seeing adversaries take advantage of this now, right? So our Bitdefender Labs team, who does a lot of our kind of threat research and malware analysis and all that, put a white paper out a little while ago talking about the impacts that COVID has had on and what adversaries are using for it, right? So adversarial tempo is up, right? Sophistication of attacks is up. They're utilizing COVID and the challenges that people are having with it and the stress and the various other things that are coming along with that. You're seeing massive increases in phishing campaigns related to getting the newest information about the virus, finding masks, whatever it happens to be, right? So not only are we have users that are out of their comfort zone and are operating a little bit differently and are changing their habits, but you're seeing a lot of adversaries trying to take advantage of that.
Whoever's responsible for security needs to be able to answer two fairly fundamental questions, regardless of the size of the company, right? You have to be able to understand, if I was being attacked by somebody, do I have everything I need in place to know that I was being attacked? Right? Would I know it was going on? Am I just going to get a phone call from law enforcement to tell me that all of my data is on the dark web somewhere, and at some point in the future? So if I was being attacked, would I know I was being attacked? And the second question is, if I knew I was being attacked, what would I be able to do about it? Right? Would I be able to defend the business? And it doesn't matter if you're talking about a small office with 10 endpoints in it, or if you're talking about a global enterprise across multiple countries. You have to be able to answer those two questions.
Sure. One note about that I think is useful is so many of the customers that we talk to, building a SOC's not on the list, right? Even building a kind of minimally capable operation is a $5 to $10 million US a year adventure, right? And that's assuming that you have a leader who's capable of doing it, that you can hire those folks and find them in your networks, right? I mean, the dollars are only one part of that. It will suck up an enormous amount of oxygen in the business environment to go and build one of these things. It takes a lot of effort and a lot of expertise and a lot of investment to go and do that. So for most of our customers, that's not on the list. So the decision is really more like, how am I going to achieve these objectives? And a lot of the times it's, well, I'm not, right? And really where MDR came from a market perspective is being able to achieve those objectives at a price that most companies can actually afford to pay, right? That's what it's about, right? So Danny and I are in the business of taking a very sophisticated cyber operation and scaling it so that it can operate across multiple customers at a price point that they can afford to pay for, right? As Danny said, there's nothing magic about what we do. It's a lot of hard work and a lot of expertise and a lot of investment. The nice thing about the idea for MDRs is that we already had customers who were doing these transformations, right? And so we've already had to learn a lot of the lessons of how to protect people who are at home, how to protect people who were using, who don't have a perimeter, who were using AWS or Azure or whatever it is. And so in a lot of cases, customers may come to us and say, oh, we're making this big change. And to an MDR, it's like, okay, well, we already know how to do that. So it's a little bit easier for us to pick it up. And of course, we're already assuming we don't have a perimeter to protect from a customer perspective, right? So we're already used to operating on the fact that it's all remote to us, right? And so some of that type of thing is a little bit easier for us to pick up just during the current timeframes.
Because what MDR fundamentally does is provides you the visibility and the expertise to know if you're being attacked or not, and then we'll take action on your behalf to stop that attack, to limit the impact to the business when that attack happens. So that's kind of the fundamental thing that MDR does. Now, there's all sorts of other things that it does as well. They'll help with security analytics. They'll help with automation. They'll pull the network and the endpoint together in some cases. They'll help with correlations.
MDR starts at a very high level and then gets a lot better over time as we understand more about what's going on in your environment. And so that interaction is critical, and building that level of trust becomes even more important if there is an incident, right? Because people are up, people are stressed, people don't know what's going on. And so having professionals that you trust be able to come and help you is an important part of that process. Customers can add additional services to that platform without increasing their cost exponentially. And it also happens to make the MDR offer much more effective, right? If I can see more from a customer environment, we can identify more and we can do more, right? And so I think you're seeing that with the rise of things like XDR, where you're talking about kind of network and host information. Our long-term goal is to be able to be the security operation for our customers. And so that means we have to go and invest in all of the areas that CISOs and have to deal with, right? And that's identity and access management. That's platform security, like SaaS and public clouds. That's governance, risk, and compliance, right? And I think you're seeing a lot of other folks that are going that direction as well. So, one of the things that MDR has going for it, one of the benefits for us from an operational perspective is we are exposed to a lot of different customers in a lot of different areas on a technology journey with a lot of different configurations, a lot of different platforms, a lot of different employees, right? All these different verticals, right? And so that means that we get to test and understand how those things are different and how our operation needs to be different to meet those customers where they're at. And so when somebody goes and works from home, like certainly remote technology is part of that, but you've also got the stress of the pandemic, right? And so that's leading to phishing issues that we've seen, right? And so, MDR has the ability of learning lessons from a lot of different customers at different journeys. So the odds are if you're contacting an MDR, the odds are that they've had some experience in the area where you're at and where you're looking to go. Right. And so it can be a little bit easier for us to deal with that complexity because we've already seen all those different platforms. That's part of the goal, right? MDR has to be able to learn the environment to be successful at delivering the outcomes that we want to deliver, right? So we have to be able to do that stuff. And so we're very used to starting from scratch and working our way up, right? And understanding more and more about what's going on in the environment. And that's why we have dedicated technical account managers. That's why we have tooling to help us do that, right? Not only do we use the expertise of our folks to do that, but of course you want to use the security analytics tools to help you too, right? And so there's lots of, whether it's machine learning or anomaly detection or whatever you want to call statistics these days, right? There's a lot of capability that we try to bring to that problem. One of the ones that I think that customers sometimes are surprised by is, when an MDR starts, we're delivering a sophisticated kind of tool set and operation in, but we don't know anything about the customer environment yet. And so over the next 30, 60, or 90 days, we're going to learn a lot about what's going on, and those things will get tweaked. And so if a customer has a process that runs once a quarter, we may not see it for 60 days after they onboard. Right. And that's normal for us. Right. And this goes to that ability to identify what's abnormal in the environment and then focus our hunting on those things that are abnormal. And that's how you find the more sophisticated adversaries. So I think some customers kind of expect, oh, hey, well, you turn it on day one and like it's done. And that's the end of my integration with it. It's not, right? We're going to be reaching out and asking questions. And we ask a lot of questions during onboarding around what are your key assets? Who are your key employees, right? All those things that we need to know to start being able to really effectively protect the organization. And that will go on over the 30, 60, 90 days during the onboarding process. The technological onboarding is much simpler than the business onboarding.
Right, so there's lots of things that we see going on from a user behavior perspective that the business may not have been aware of. So that tends to surprise customers. And the other thing is that we're able to tell the customer a lot about the environment and how well it's been hardened from a security perspective. We see things that aren't good practice in the way that things have been configured. Often even with our own, with the Bitdefender tooling, if the customer has been a Bitdefender customer for a long time, what we may see when we take over is that the way that they have the tool configured is actually making it less impactful, but less effective within the environment, right? So they may have tuned things down so that it wasn't so noisy, but in doing so, they've opened themselves up to more risk, right? So we're able to tell them of those things as well. So I would say that the state of the environment and also user behavior are two things that typically surprise our customers. The moment that we turn the service on, the moment that we direct the technology to the security operations center, they're providing value, right? So the initial value that they provide is that you now have an expert analyst who's been doing this for a long time, triaging and investigating the alerts that the technology is generating. And that's very valuable, because what we see all the time is that organizations, they go out and they buy technology, but they don't really know what to do with the output of that technology, right? So we solve for that immediately. Like, we immediately start applying expertise to the telemetry that's being pushed out by the toolkit that we use. I think that people and process are going to be the things that are overlooked by companies now. It doesn't matter what you put in place from a security perspective. Security is a people problem, and it doesn't. You can have a lot of process in place. You can have some fantastic technology in place, but if employee number one uses password as a password, then his credentials are going to be stolen, and you put the company at risk again. So that you've got that people element now, which is magnified because you've got people who are at home in their home environments, very relaxed. Everyone's going to work in their PJs now. So whereas people before were going to the office and putting their office clothes on and were probably thinking about what they were clicking on and how they were operating at home, and they probably had posters all around their workspace which was reminding them about phishing campaigns and various things, password strengths, and all of this types of stuff. You've now got people at home now who are very relaxed, and so that increases the risk that you're going to have kind of these personnel related security breaches. And the other thing is that we alluded earlier to the fact that a lot of the process that we've built no longer works, and when you're having to regenerate process, what that tends to start with is bad process, right? Workarounds, band-aids, right? How am I going to make this work today? And all of those process gaps that you're creating by adopting to this new normal, all of those process gaps can be understood and exploited by adversaries.